Hello, everyone. Good morning. Jacqueline Foster here. If you could let me know if you're in here right now, let me know that you can hear me. I'm just going to adjust some things here before we get started. Let me know if you can hear me in the comments. I'd really appreciate it. I have my mic set up. And we are going to get right into today's webinar. All right. I just realized I hadn't had my thing changed. All right. Let me know if you can hear me. I'm going to double check on LinkedIn here, make sure that everything is working before I get going. And then awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Hey, Corinne. Hi, Michael. Thanks so much. All right. We are live. We are ready to go. People can hear me. I'm going to switch over to my presentation here. Welcome to the webinar today, Solo to Supported, where I'm going to run you through growing your practice, reducing operational strain, and increasing your profitability. I'm super excited. This is my favorite topic to speak on. So let's jump right in. So before I jump in, today's agenda, what are we going to cover today? This webinar is really geared towards the solo attorney, the growing law firm, the small firm, those solos that are looking for a less restrictive way of growth, the path of less resistance in growing a law firm and sustaining the growth as it comes. And I specialize in supporting attorneys and law firms across the United States with paralegals to help them grow their law firm. So we're going to look at the role of paralegals in a law firm from a growth perspective today. We're going to talk about the functional contributions, the financial impact. Awesome. My signal is 5 times. I don't know what that means. Thanks, Michael. We're going to talk about the financial impact, the profit analysis. We're going to run through my unique stepping stone staffing strategy for sustainable growth. I'm going to talk about the overview and the concept of this staffing strategy to help you sustain long-term growth in your firm, as well as how to implement it into yours. At the very end, I'm going to give you some tools and resources so you can implement this into your law firm. It's not just hypotheticals and scenario-based. It's something you can take away at the end of this at the end of this presentation and start implementing it in your firm today. So a quick overview on who I am and why I, specifically Jacqueline Foster, am presenting this topic to you today. I am a paralegal by trade. My career started as a paralegal, and in 2020, I started what is known as Del Trust Law Firm Staffing Solutions. So I specialize now in the strategic staffing of law firms as it relates to their growth, implementing virtual paralegals, vendors, outside staffing solutions beyond just your traditional in-house employee that helps you get to that in-house employee. I'm also the founder of the Paralegal Freelance Lounge, where I coach and mentor paralegals across the United States to start their own freelance businesses and support law firms in a very amazing way, I guess, for a lack of better words. Since in June of this year, so 4 years post my business's inception, I have now partnered with Zirtual, and I serve Zirtual in a president capacity for their paralegal division. So Del Trust, powered by Zirtual, now we are exponentially thriving to service more law firms across the United States. You might have heard me on some common legal platforms such as the Unbillable Hour, Profit with Law. I was at the Law Firm Growth Summit speaking on this topic this year as a repeat guest. I've been at the Women of Law Conference. I've been kind of all over talking about my methodologies and what I do with my firms that work with me. And if you haven't checked out any of these amazing podcasts, I highly recommend you go do so. All right, so enough about me. Let's dive into the webinar. At any point today, if you have any questions that come up, please make sure to drop them in the comments. I'll be popping in sort of in between each segment to make sure I'm covering questions that you might have that might arise along the way. So let's start with why am I speaking on this topic today? And let's move this into what I am trying to help you to change your conceptions or your belief systems around what a paralegal is and how so many law firms have this consequential misconception of a paralegal in a law firm. So we want to be moving, and this is what I'm going to teach you how to do today, is moving paralegals out of that expense category within your law firm and into the investment category, into your top line revenue category and your cost of goods sold category before you start plunging them into that general bottom line expense category, so that you can look at it having a strong ROI with every hire you make within your law firm moving forward. This will help you increase that bottom line as your top line goes up. So many law firms see, okay, we're getting more revenue in, our marketing team is really working and doing their job, we're getting more retainers signed, we're adding our billables every single month, but my bottom line is just completely dropping out and I'm losing that as my top line's going up. So we're going like, I don't know if I could do that like this, right? With our growth. I want you to move them out of this common misconception so you can create a strategic staffing plan for sustainable growth in your firm and build both a role centric and team centric law firm for seamless strategy implementation year over year. So every time you sit down to make a quarterly goal, a hiring goal for this year, for next year, you really have clear data in front of you in your law firm so you can make that smart hiring decision every single time instead of hiring off the cuff, hiring in an urgent need, hiring in a panic mode. Okay. So, excuse me. Let's first start by fixing this paralegal misconception. Now, paralegals have traditionally over the years been clumped and clustered into a multitude of expense roles. It wasn't until just recently, over these last years, that paralegals earned the distinction from the American Bar Association, from your legal receptionist, from your legal assistant, and really identified what a paralegal is as it relates to their role in the law firm. And unfortunately, that's still taking time for law firms to really not only recognize that distinction necessarily from a level of, hey, paralegals earned it, but more so recognize the distinction from how they're leveraging that paralegal in their firm. So most firms do what we call the split case method. And this is a big mistake when you're looking at staffing. They are taking a paralegal in, hiring them for whatever the salary is in your area for a paralegal with experience, but they're putting them in all sorts of different roles for each case. So you say, here's your 25 cases, you're going to do the legal assistant role, you're going to do the receptionist role, you're going to work with the clients, you're going to work with the intake, you're going to organize the file, you're going to do complex legal research, you're going to do all the things that a paralegal does, but everything else on this case. This case is your baby, you own it, you do everything on it for that case. But paralegals really belong in that investment role. So we have them in the expense role because a lot of what they do when we split cases is not necessarily billable back to your client. So therefore, we're putting them in that expense category, and at least half of what they do, or a good chunk of what they do, is now an expense versus an investment. And what they really, because they have that distinction in their experience, in their expertise, in what they've been trained to do, experienced to do, they need to be focusing more on those billable hours if they're utilized properly, because we know if they are billing out hours for your law firm, it's a return on investment for you. Whatever you're paying that paralegal, you are marking up their hourly rate and you are billing that to your client, which is making your firm money. The other way that a paralegal, if utilized properly, can become an investment is to leverage them for practice area crossovers. As you start to want to add different practice areas that complement those that are currently in your firm, for instance, family law firms are really starting to look at that holistic lifelong partnership with the family, offering estate planning services. You might want to start adding Medicare planning, Medicaid planning to your estate practice. Those types of things, a paralegal that has that unique experience within those practice areas that you might not yet have can help you get into the crossover into that new practice area. And further, they have the practice area focus. So a paralegal with experience is typically focused in on a practice area or complementary practice areas. So you're not bringing in a paralegal necessarily jack of all trades, master of none, which is commonly what you will find in your legal assistant roles, that they've been playing around with a lot of different things in different practice areas. You can strategically hire paralegals that are so well versed in a practice area, whether that's litigation, family law, personal injury, whatever that may be, so that they have that extra amount of experience to keep themselves very, very on point, center focused in what makes your practice money. Okay. We call it a lateral hire, right? So that's been sort of the big theme since post pandemic, when the employee market sort of blew up on us in the legal space, where we need to look at, okay, we don't have the resources to train into new practice areas, but you find those paralegals that already have that experience, and the training therefore is very minimal because they have so much focus on that practice area. In summary, think of it as an attorney is very focused in their practice area. They specialize, if you will. Paralegals are now doing so as well, especially as they're being more strategically utilized for what I'm going to talk about next, the more complex work. They're focusing in on that practice area to become that expert within it for their work. Okay. The next is that to utilize them as an investment is that they do things beyond that admin function. So going back to number one, where we're talking about clustering them into all of these different roles within a law firm that don't actually make the firm money, it definitely is what's making the firm function on the back end, right? We need those things to help support the background of the firm, but keeping them in the front to help free up the attorney 10x beyond those admin functions, the legal research, the complex drafting, the case analysis, making summarizations for their attorney. This is now freeing the attorney up to bill more hours at their hourly rate. This is freeing the attorney up to have more time to go to court, do more depositions, have more consultations, the things that only attorneys can do in a law firm, that if a paralegal did, it would be considered the unauthorized practice of law. We want to free up that attorney to be able to take in and do more of what they can only do in a law firm. Okay. So now let's jump into, I keep talking about paralegals, ROI potential, and let's look at this from an annual scenario. I'm utilizing the 1,500, I guess you'll call it the infamous, depending on who you ask, 1,500 billable hours per year. That's typically the target that each firm will want to see their paralegals billing out at if they're creating KPIs, milestones, targets for them in forms of bonus incentives, those types of things, or just job security incentive. Is we want to see you billing out 1,500 hours per year. Now, why I call it infamous is because many attorneys I'm going to get into the next slide and show you what's usually happening on to that paralegal. But many attorneys are expecting them to hit that 1,500 billable hours per year, but going back are asking them to do all the things that aren't billable, that they can't bill their time for. So they feel a little strapped in their day-to-day work. And so a paralegal, and I'm using $150 per hour just for example purposes. A lot of firms are charging $250, $200, some are charging less, but let's use that $150 as an example just so we can look at some numbers here. When we take a paralegal and we're billing them out at $150 per hour for 1,500 billable hours per year, that paralegal should be generating the firm $225,000 per year. Less their cost, say a very senior paralegal in your area. Now this is going to range, depending on where you're at. Let's say on average, for national average is around 75,000. So that should be netting you 150,000 in profits from that paralegal, less, once you take away their salary. Looking at that paralegal has an ROI potential of 67% on the gross profit margin. If they are focusing all of their time, or at least 1,500 billable hours per year on that work. But this, and now I'm talking about the split case method, this is the common staffing mistake that firms are making. And specifically firms that are brand new are making this mistake where they are splitting their cases. So as they grow, they say, okay, I need 600 billable hours. So this paralegal handle that. And then I'm going to hire another one because it's just too much for the paralegal to handle 50% billable work, 25% admin, 25% client services work. Those things that you cannot bill to the client, they are maxed out and only billing out 600 hours while they're spending more time, a full-time capacity on things that aren't making your firm money. They're only able to get to 600 billable hours per year, which is only generating you 90,000 in revenue with our 150 per hour scenario. less their costs, because just because you don't have them strategically focused, they're still costing you that 75,000 to come in with the experience to even handle those 600 billable hours, which is only netting your firm 15,000. So you times this by 2 and you take, okay, now we need another paralegal slash legal assistant slash client services coordinator to do all the work, billable or not, on this chunk of cases. We're doubling our billables, right? From 600 to 50. We're still at 1,500 hours, but we're needing 2 paralegals to handle it because we have them also functioning in the admin capacity and doing those things that don't make the firm money. That is sinking your gross profit margin to 17%. And this is the most common staffing mistake that I see out there. I was a product of this staffing mistake. When I was a paralegal in firm, I worked for a very solo, small law firm in a very rural area. We did not have a lot of resources to hire, say, high level paralegals, what have you. But this is what we did every single time we made a new hire, and we had very bad turnover as a result. Is that, because we also were hiring the legal assistants that didn't have that full ability to do the complex paralegal work. And we were losing even more money having to redo things. And we're having one person focusing on it and then the attorneys fixing it. Now we're actually losing money because you can't charge your clients for mistakes, all those things. They keep adding. Okay, now we need a third. Now we need a fourth. Now we need a fifth, but they're stuck at that 17% gross profit margin. Now, I know before anybody drops off on me and says, well, Jacqueline, like the admin work has to be done. I absolutely 100% back that. We need somebody working with your clients, giving them a great customer experience. We need the legal assistant support. And yes, legal assistants will perform some billables, but to make it very simple for demonstrative purposes, we're just looking at, say your legal assistant is not performing any billable work. If they are, even better. I need an admin and client services coordinator support too, especially as a solo practice. Usually we're starting in a solo practice with a legal assistant and a client services coordinator. We don't have the $75,000 set aside to be able to hire a high level paralegal. So we're like, how do I get, now I need paralegals, and who do I have doing the legal assistant? What does that margin look like? So now once we're taking the 150 an hour, we're putting that paralegal, we're hiring that paralegal specifically to do billable hours. You're getting back to that $150,000 profit. You're also taking off the cost of that second hire to help support all of this function. And you're at a 44% gross profit margin, which looks a lot better than a 17% gross profit margin. So we get so stuck in the hiring crisis, if you will, where we're rapid firing as we're growing this law firm out, as you're getting more clients, we're rapid hiring more people. We're not thinking about a role-centric firm in the moment that we start to get into this cycle, this habitual cycle of continuing to hire for low profit margins and think that, okay, this is going to eventually get me profit eventually as I keep adding it. And yes, it does bring profit into your law firm, but you're leaving so much potential on the table by not doing a role-centric firm, instead looking at a split case method law firm. So let's break that apart. I'm going to stop here, make sure I don't have any questions coming in. If anybody has any questions or wants me to slow down at any point, please let me know. Okay, so let's look at the role-centric law firm for proper staffing strategy. Where do we begin? How do we start identifying what the paralegal should work on versus the legal assistant versus the client services coordinator, what have you, within a law firm? I took an example of a personal injury case, and this is going to look different for every state and how you run, how your procedures go in your jurisdiction. But really breaking apart this step-by-step process on getting a case from conception to just getting the demand letter out the door. I haven't even gone into drafting complaints and starting the litigation process and going into discovery. These are all just sort of those tasks that are involved in a brand new client in a personal injury firm until we get that demand letter out to the carrier. So we can look at, and I'm not going to go through each individual one, this isn't a lesson on personal injury, but we can look and start compartmentalizing different types of tasks and subtasks within those tasks, where you can take a notepad out or a document and start saying, okay, request medical records to each provider. Does a senior level paralegal really need to be doing that? No, your legal assistant with very little experience that costs you a lot less can definitely be the one that is staying on the medical providers, making sure that they are getting the right forms, having your client signing those forms, the HIPAA release, the medical releases, those types of things. We're in here where we go, okay, summarize those medical records. Now let's summarize them and draft that demand letter and get that demand letter to the attorney. This is where you want to put your paralegal. So law firms are really, when we start pulling apart the step by step and really look at it for what it is and what tasks are involved in the bigger picture milestone tasks, we can start to see the different professionals that could come in to support these individual tasks to get to that end goal of getting that, for example, demand letter out. And what's really great about all of this is at the end, really where the attorney needs to be involved is day one, doing that client consultation, providing the legal advice, the things that the attorney or the paralegal can't do. And then right here, once that right in between, that drafted demand letter from your paralegal hands it over to the attorney for their review, edits, and final sign off to say, yep, get it out to the carriers. There should be no reason why a paralegal has to gather all of these things. And like I said, it's even a bonus because a lot of these are going to be billable to your client. But the paralegal does not need to be doing that. You can focus your paralegal time, what you're paying the higher level amount for that paralegal, into these sections of the case. So going from a split case where you're going to have the one paralegal, hey, this is your case, take it forward. They're going to do all of these things because it's their case, versus the role-centric firm where you're going to have two people working on it together in a team approach to come to the end goal and keep your margins high. Now, I know a lot of attorneys will say, well, that role-centric firm where we're having too many hands in the case gets very, very complex. This is a step-by-step repeatable process every single time. This is something you put in a case management system and say, okay, do this, check it off, check it off, check it off. Task list templates where it just automatically applies to that case and everybody knows what their role is in the firm. Further, as you go with this role-centric approach to make your next hire, you start to see, okay, I'm tracking all the data on every single one of these tasks over all of these cases. I'm starting to see my legal assistant is overloaded. We need to make a hiring decision for another legal assistant. Maybe you start to work on advancing that legal assistant into paralegal role, look at career growth for that person, and then add in another legal assistant. Or you might start to see, okay, now my paralegal is overloaded. My billable hours are shooting through the roof and they cannot keep up. We're starting to work overtime, those types of things. You will not know that until you can actually pull apart your cases and see what each individual task needs to be done to get to that end goal. We might think we know, because we do it over and over and over and over every single day in our work, but we're really not taking the time to actually pull it apart and say, look at all of these tasks that are within the big picture task that gets to that end goal. And this is what makes it possible to have this. This is what helps you determine what this professional, this paralegal, is going to be working on at their higher rate and what this professional is going to be working on at their lower cost. Okay. So any questions on that? Great. I'm not seeing any questions coming through, so I'm just going to keep running through. All right. So this is what I am here to really, really teach. I've ran through the proper staffing approach for a law firm for optimal gross profit margins, for optimal sustainable growth, to watch that bottom line going up with your top line revenue. But I know, and this is where I specialize, and this is what I really want to focus on today, is the stepping stone staffing strategy that will allow you to get there. Because this is the most common issue I see. I've worked with over 300 law firms in the last 4 years across the United States in a multitude of practice areas, transactional, litigation, what have you, are dealing with this problem every single time they go to grow their firm to the next level, to the next goal, right? The next goal mark is they have this problem right here. What typically is happening through these growth phases. I'm telling you how amazing paralegals are. I'm telling you how amazing it is when you could do a role-centric firm. but it's the financials to get through those phases of growth with keeping those margins high. Law firms get stuck in the growth phase and they can't justify that full-time hire quite yet until they stabilize their next bottom line billables. So we're looking at a 1,500-hour billable to a 3,000 billable stepping platform, right? We're going from 15 to 3,000. And there's this gap right here. Before we can justify a full-time paralegal, we're like, well, now I'm going to have my legal assistant doing paralegal work. And this is where the split case method just keeps happening over and over again. And you're putting people in positions that they're not totally qualified for because you need somebody to support you in the in-between phase, the 1,500 to 3,000 phase. I have 200 extra billables, 400 extra billables, 700 extra billables. I can justify a full-time paralegal. So the attorney is trying to make up through extra working hours on themselves, or they're overloading the unqualified staff to get there. They're hiring the wrong staff and they start that split case method and they start killing their profits, and they lose consistency within their marketing. So you'll see these arrows up and down. This is then what happens, and we're not finding sustainable, consistent growth in a law firm is because we're going up and then we're going back down. We're going up in our hours, we're growing, and then we're telling our marketing to shut off, right? We're telling our marketing to shut off in between those phases because we're just not figuring out how to sustain it. I just had a consultation yesterday. The attorney said, I completely shut my marketing down. I said, we cannot take any more clients right now until we get our staffing figured out. And that will happen every single step of the way. And it's a vicious cycle that law firms just cannot find their way out of, especially in those early stages where they're not having the profits, the working capital set aside to cover that next jump into the next stage of growth. The stepping stone staffing method is what I like to propose to my clients within our consultations, which is an option available for that sustainable growth. And it's more accessible than you might think. This is where law firms are hiring for exactly what they need in the moment, allowing for that steady, sustainable growth each step of the way. And I'm not super creative, but this is the best I could come up with to demonstrate what I mean about the stepping stone staffing strategy. We have a staircase and we're placing little stones for the little guys from bottom to top. We're placing little stones for them to climb it, right? Step by step. And in doing this, attorneys don't have to work triple overtime to make up for it, to keep their firm growing. Do you ever find yourself? I mean, I've had attorneys say it's like, I finally think that we got somewhere and then we keep growing. And I find myself in the same situation over and over again. You know, my family's getting frustrated with me. I'm taking my laptop with me on trips. I'm working on Christmas morning before everybody else gets up as much as I can get in. They're working triple overtime to make up for it. And it doesn't end because they keep trying to grow. They think that, okay, once we get here, once we get to this revenue level, I won't have to do that anymore. But for some reason, they keep finding themselves as the founder, as the owner of the business, being the one that has to make up for it and get to the next level. And it happens repeated. Your infirm staff is avoided by you're avoiding overburdening your infirm staff. And this is huge because retention is power. Keeping your staff in your firm is power for your growth. Retention or turnover rates kill your profits. It keeps pushing you back into, okay, we have to go back to the hiring board, back to the training board, back to the onboarding board. We have to hire a recruiter. We don't have time to sit and interview hundreds of unqualified candidates just to narrow down the 3 that might work. So we hire a recruiter and they take 25% of the first year's salary. And we keep having to do that because my staff is unhappy. They feel overburdened. They feel overburdened and understimulated all at the same time. By adding in little guys to help you get from 1,500 to 3,000, you're keeping gross and net profit margins healthy. Thinking back, you're allowing yourself to stay true to your role-centric firm and keep hiring strategically for what makes your firm money instead of shrinking your profit margins because you're throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping these new hires can keep up. You're allowed to keep your marketing consistent. You have a chance to let your marketing build upon itself. You put so much effort, you might be working with a marketing agency and they're like, content is where it's at. We got to get you on TikTok, LinkedIn Shorts, Reels, YouTube long form. You're trying to join the new trends of marketing and it works right now, but it has to build on itself, right? It has to build to stay visible, to stay relevant, to stay consistent. So your marketing agency is a lot happier with you. GNGF is where I did my first interview with a marketing agency because he's like, my clients keep shutting us off and then we lose all of our momentum. So what is the option out there for them so we can keep them going? And then finally, the attorney doesn't have to worry about overcommitments and hiring risks. A lot of firms are like, well, I want to avoid all this. So I'm just going to take a leap of faith and hire a full-time employee to hopefully get them up to capacity within the next 6 months. And that's a big hiring risk. I can't tell you how many times, truly, my attorney that I worked with, when we would go through these ebbs and flows and try to keep up with staffing, would not take a paycheck home himself so that he could pay his staff. And that's not what we want to see either. We want to make sure our attorneys are actually feeling like this is worth it. Being a business owner is worth it and I get to pay myself consistently every single month, right? So how do we do it? How do we add these little guys in here? It's probably going to be a no-brainer considering or it's not a shock to you considering I work with freelance paralegals. I build up freelance paralegals. We staff law firms across the United States with appropriate freelance paralegals. You can build your profit margins with freelance paralegals utilizing the stepping stone method. These green guys in between 1,500 and 3,000 hours, those are freelance paralegals or freelance legal assistants, depending on where, going back to your role-centric firm, where are you short? Who is getting overburdened? Who needs more support, right? And in doing this, during these phases of adding in the freelance paralegal specifically hired for your firm with their correct practice area experience, with the professionalism that you need, hiring the right ones that are amazing communicators that integrate perfectly with your firm, that have no training requirement whatsoever other than you just showing them your systems. This is where my forms are. This is where my, how I store, this is how we docket. No training needed. They know your jurisdiction. They know your practice area, can provide you a 60% profit margin as you're growing to that next 3,000 billable hour. And how that happens is, say you need 240 extra billable hours per year. That's 20 a month, right? You're just needing that little extra 20 hours a month right now to keep things above water and keep it going up. They have a $60 per hour rate, which a lot of attorneys will look at and say, that's wild. I could hire a person in-house for less than that. But going back, can you justify them? How many hours are being unneeded when you're hiring a full-time paralegal, but you don't have enough work to keep them pumping out billables? So they come at a $60 per hour rate, for an example. That's kind of the national average right now. And you're billing them out at 240, or they're billing you for 240 hours, they're $14,400 expense for the year. But you're billing them out at 150, giving you a $36,000 per $1,000 billable, giving you a 60% profit margin and profiting your firm $21,600 per year or per year. Now this is repeatable. So going back to this is repeatable. This is repeatable in between 3,000 and 4,500, 4,500 and 6,000. And the attorneys right now that are in that solo stage or in that solo and growing stage, maybe you're starting to bring support in, you're getting your firm traction, you're getting visibility, you're getting consistent clients coming in every month. You can continue to apply this for truly the rest of your law firm's growing journey, right? You can repeat this and say, okay, I need to increase you now to 40 hours per month. That 60% profit margin is always going to stay, which allows you to put more money into your working capital, more money into your account to afford you when you're ready to go hire that next paralegal full-time or legal assistant full-time. You have that wiggle room to take those bigger leaps into hiring the next person. And my firms that I usually work with, we work through this cycle. I have some clients that have been with me for 4 years since I started my staffing agency back in 2020. And we continue to go back and say, okay, now we need to go back down to 40 hours a month. And then because we just hired somebody, so let's put this paralegal back down to 20, 40 hours a month, and then let's start growing to the next again and repeating this. Okay. So, sorry about that. Make sure I have my right screen up. Next phase is creating your own stepping stone staffing plan. How do you apply this to your own law firm? What can you do today to get started? Number one, going back to that big old page where I wrote down every tiny little thing you could possibly think of needs to be done in an opening a new personal injury case. Let's start assessing your current staffing needs and gaps. First and foremost, look at your firm from a role-centric point of view. Even if you do have the split cases method, even if you don't have any staff at all, so you're absolutely solo, you're by yourself, no assistants, nothing. Still pull out and look at how your firm can become role centric. Whether you're an estate planning attorney, business, family law, personal injury, take the time to break apart your case flows. And do it to such an extent that you can see not only the milestones, but the tasks to get to that milestone, and then the subtasks within that task, and then the micro tasks within that subtask. I know this sounds daunting, but once you start doing it, it goes really quickly. You know your case, you know your cases, you know your practice area. Okay, in order to get my estate planning, my will package signed by my client and done, let's work our way backwards on all the little things that come into play, from the printing to the getting the deeds all put together to what have you, gathering information from your clients, filling out that intake form with them, giving them that white glove experience, right? Break apart your case flows as much as you possibly can, even if you don't have anybody helping you right now. Even if you're the chief of everything officer, you're doing it all. Identify what all that is that you're doing, because then you can identify ideal assignments. You can look at it and say, yeah, very certain a legal assistant can do that. Very certain intern can handle the printing, right? You can start to I look at the skill sets required, the experience required, and the professional required to do what, right? And don't look at this from a right now point of view. Say, okay, well, yeah, I would really like a client services coordinator to specifically handle intake with my clients, but right now a legal assistant can do it. Just write that in there, that a client services coordinator would be the most ideal person to assign to this part of my process. Okay. From there, then apply that information to your current caseload. So current status based on volume. Question, is your firm tracking everything? If it's not, it should be. And when I say everything, I mean billables, not billables. Have your people start to record their time and everything they do in the firm. And I want to take a side moment here because I know I've had a lot of lawyers say my staff would absolutely despise me if I made them track their time. I know nobody in the law firm likes to track their time, which is kind of a funny concept because it's all we have to sell is our time. But for some reason, I don't care if it's an attorney, a paralegal, legal assistant, like everybody is notoriously bad at tracking their time. I was too. It's like, I really got to get my billables in. I got to get my time in. We got to get invoices out. I have it set aside somewhere, but just getting it into the system, right? So what I always tell them, I know your staff does not want you to feel like you're micromanaging them. You're watching their every move. Like you don't want to create that environment in your firm. Explain to them that the reason you're doing this, which is the truth, is so that you can gauge their workload. You can gauge if they're overburdened, if they need more support. This is gathering data. It's so difficult in a law firm to really separate yourself and say, I do need to start tracking data, but what do I track? How do I put this into a tangible piece of information that I can make informed decisions based off of? The only way you can do this in a firm is really getting down to understanding what everybody's doing, where your time is being spent. And that includes you, attorney. You need to do that too. You need to be identifying how much time am I spending on the phone with my client explaining, the the simplest things that my paralegal is more than qualified to tell them, next up will be a hearing, and this is when you can predict that, right? Identify how much time you're spending just going through your email to try to figure out what's important, what needs immediate action, and what is spam and does not need immediate action. How much time are you spending drafting first drafts of demand letters, of discovery, of motions that a senior paralegal could definitely do down the road? Really get clear on where you're spending your time, because then you can utilize formulas to predict the future status. So what is it going to look like on the admin and client services side? How much for 15 to 3,000 billables of your paralegal? How much time is that admin and CSC needing? Right? Start to gain that data and then develop KPIs for each team member, both internal and outsourced independent professionals. You can create KPIs for freelance paralegals. That's one of the biggest misconceptions, is that you just throw a freelance paralegal in and you have no control in how you're utilizing them. Yes, we have to be mindful of 1099 laws and their own regulations, but as it relates to what it means for your firm, you can develop those KPIs to determine for yourself if this freelance paralegal, this virtual paralegal, is still hitting metrics that you need for that paralegal to maintain a 60% profit margin for you. And then develop, with knowing though that's all of that information in your law firm, actually having insight into your data, you can now develop a phased hiring plan. You can start creating a projection dashboard, create a law firm CEO dashboard that I do offer you in my free consultations if you need one. Having that CEO dashboard to project, okay, I know these things about my staff. I know these things about my formulas, how many hours it takes a legal assistant to run a case for every hour the paralegal's running the case. Because then with that information and forecasting, you can develop that phased hiring plan that aligns with your projected growth. And you can also look at internal staff development plans for optimal employee satisfaction and retention. So you can start looking at that and saying, okay, I also know to be a good employer, I have to give my people the career growth opportunities that they're looking for. How does that fit into my projections? Where can I put them next that gets them to that next level, that has them start doing some paralegal work, right? How can I develop this professional? Because then you become more of a CEO position in running your law firm. You're actually running your law firm from the data, and you can revisit these firm analytics and hiring plans quarterly, yearly, biannually. You can develop those KPIs every single time and look at them and let them tell you what you need to know to make informed decisions in growing this firm to the next level. Okay. Now, before I give you another option to start today to get really, clear on your law firm's growth and strategy, let's talk about hiring freelance legal professionals. I want to take a little brief 5 minutes to run through this for those that it might be a new world out there of saying, where do I even go about finding one? How do I know if it's the right fit? First and foremost, let's talk quickly about a couple more benefits that I didn't touch on in this webinar today. We talked about the scalability, so I won't rehash that out in helping and how freelance legal professionals, legal assistants, client services coordinators, intake, what have you, paralegals, they also have the flexibility, right? We know firms ebb and flow. We know every practice area has its peak seasons and slow seasons. We know that for whatever is in the water that month, you might just be just drowning in cases, and it's not easy to predict, right? Sometimes we think we know what our busy seasons are, but it could flip on you for whatever reason. What's going on out in the world, right? What's driving people to make these decisions to come work with us? They have that flexibility. You're not hiring that full-time paralegal and you have to pay them, or you tell your full-time employee, hey, I got to set you back to part-time. They're going to go be looking for another job. You have that flexibility to ebb and flow them with your practice, within reason, of course. And then the experience. So my location specifically, and the locations I worked in as a paralegal when I was in firm as an employee, we didn't have access to a lot of experience. I trained massage professionals to become legal assistants, Target associates to become legal assistants with no legal background, which is wonderful. I love to see, more professionals entering the legal space, and they need that training. But when you're needing that high level experience, a lot of the times it's not accessible in your location. Or on the flip side, I've worked with firms in Chicago, big insurance. I worked with a big insurance defense firm as one of my first freelancing gigs as a paralegal. When I was doing the paralegal work, their problem was around them is the competition, right? So they start to look at different strategies of saying, okay, the firm up the street is paying 100,000 per year. We can't compete with that, right? We can't compete with the firm that's paying the 100,000, the full paid benefits, unlimited PTO, what have you. So it's either the experience lacks or the experience is there and we can't afford it, can't compete to get it. So how do you go about finding and hiring them? Now, first and foremost, I highly want to encourage you to schedule a call with me. I help you to identify what the right freelance legal professional is. If you try to go and do it on your own, absolutely you can. I highly encourage you to focus on very specific and niched freelance paralegals. There are paralegals out there that utilize this as a side gig, if you will, that aren't really specialized. They're offering a variety of services. I don't want you to throw spaghetti at a wall in your law firm in any capacity. And when you're hiring a freelance paralegal, you have the ability to be very choosy in the person you're hiring. It's a business to business relationship. It's no longer what's the employee market offering me. There is going to be a paralegal out there that fits your needs. So you can utilize, your Google searching, what have you, but very much make sure to find the ones that are going to be very specific to your firm. And then the onboarding and collaboration / workflow. Now, depending on where you're hiring your legal professional, you might be hiring just for breaking free a bottleneck. And some companies offer singular services to do so. For instance, you might have a company that offers medical record retrieval and that's it. You're going to be integrating into their systems to allow them to work at optimal capacity for you. But when you're hiring a freelance professional to come into your firm and work your cases, you want to make sure you bring them into your systems. I train all of my freelance paralegals to be open for this, to say the firm needs you to make delegation as seamless as possible. You don't want to add work to your plate or your staff's plate just to offload work. They should be able to integrate into your systems. You can provide them a firm branded email address if you have them, especially working with third parties, your clients, courts, what have you. Bring them into your systems and your workflows that you already have for immediate impact. Okay. And finally, I highly encourage you to schedule a free custom law firm staffing strategy session with me so I can provide you a really clear-cut forward path where I think your money is going to be best spent in the current moment, whether that is with a legal assistant, a paralegal. I help my law firms break down their case flows. I help my law firms break down their role-centric process that I discussed earlier and say, this is where this professional should be, and this is where this professional should be. Like I said, I have clients that I've worked with for 4 years straight, and we continue to look at strategy through each growth phase. And that's what I'm here to do, as well as make a custom match for a freelance paralegal. So I always go custom with it. We have to be meeting the needs of the firm, because what our ultimate objective is with a law firm outsourcing a legal professional in a business to business capacity is immediate impact. It can't be something that, okay, in 90 days, I start seeing payback on it. I start seeing return on this decision to bring this person into my firm. It should be immediate impact from the first week you begin to work with that professional. So we definitely want to look at hiring the right person for your firm, even in this business to business capacity, even in the freelance capacity, and not look at it as a Band-Aid, a quick fix. Immediate impact for long-term sustainable growth is the ultimate goal. All right. We are up on our webinar. Thank you guys so very much for joining. Any questions that I can answer for you? Now, if you want to go to schedule a custom law firm staffing strategy session, my calendar is quite open. go to freelanceparalegals.com/law firms. That is where you can find the link to schedule with me. And we're going to run through it with you based on your practice area, based on your specific bottlenecks, your specific pain points. There's a common theme of pain points that every law firm deals with. You're welcome, Michael. Thank you so very much for joining today. There's a common theme for every law firm that they experience a pain point. It always almost stems back to growth, but there's different factors that are making growth a pain point in the firm, whether it's access to talent, access to capital, phases, getting through that from billable to billable. You're welcome, Christina. I'm so glad. All right. There's always that common theme. How does one get into freelance paralegal, legal secretary services? So if you're asking how to become a freelance paralegal or a legal assistant, definitely visit freelanceparalegals.com. There are resources in there for paralegals as well. The common theme of growth, but looking at it, why is growth impacting you specifically? You're very welcome, Stephanie. Yes, you're very, very welcome. Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys so very much for joining me today. Thank you for the comments. And feel free to, if you're not ready to schedule a staffing strategy session with me and you have a couple of questions you want to ask, feel free to direct message me. My info is all on my LinkedIn profile. Happy to answer any questions you might have before you start exploring this opportunity, this option for growing your law firm in a sustainable way. All right. So thank you guys so very much and have a great rest of your day.